Welcome back to the series that you'll soon nickname the Pain Train. Today you'll be learning about variables and data types, what they are and why and how you use them. Now variables can be used in any script, server, local or module, but variables aren't exactly a necessary tool for programming, but it will make your life around 400 times easier. Also, you'll probably get laughed at by any other programmer if you don't know how to use them. Data types are just the types of data that exist in the programming universe and are fairly straightforward to understand. There are a grand total of 6 data types, but I also like to include instances as data type even though technically isn't one, so really there are only 5. The first one I'll cover is bool, short for boolean. A boolean value is a binary value of either true or false, the rest is self-explanatory. String data types are just words, however can be numbers or special characters too, and are identified through quotation marks like this. The character data type is a data type less talked about than my existence, as it is one of the most useless creations known to mankind, more useless than a pet rock. I kid you not, it is literally a string with one character in it. That is it. There's nothing special about it at all. Now watch me create one. Anyway, an int, short for integer, is any number without a decimal point. Examples include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but not 3.14 or 1.1, which brings us to our next data type, the float. Short for floating point numbers, floats are integers with a decimal point in it, thus why it is floating. It has no definitive value within the computer, as computers don't really have a mechanic to store decimal point numbers. Finding the instance data type, as I mentioned, isn't included in any of the famous 5 of data types, however I believe it should be included. An instance is any object within your game, for example a part or a mesh or a UI element, or even your player. Instances are defined through referencing them in a specific syntax, which I'll cover in the variables part of this video. Variables are particularly straightforward and is basically what you expect it to be, something that holds a value for something else. In Luau, variables have 2 components, which I like to call the label and the value. The label is what you want to name the variable's shortcut, and the value is what you assign to the label. You might hear some people call labels indexes and values references, which is fine too, names don't really matter. Variables essentially serve as a shortcut to reference some other thing, usually an object or some other data type. The syntax to define a variable is label equals value, where you substitute label for some name and value for the thing that the label will be called for. For example, say I wanted to create a script that records the details for a job applicant. I would need to have the variables for their name, gender, and age, etc. For example, let's say my good friend Joe applied to become an agent in the FBI. Let's write a variable for his first name and his last name separately and create a few more variables for some other details. Now the first name and last name are string variables, and so is the position he's applying for and his address. His gender is an integer, and we also need something to test his intelligence, so let's write a tricky question that he responded to, but if we mark if it is correct or not with the boolean value of true or false. Now that we have all of this data, we can reference it through a label like so. We use print statements that we learned from the last video to recall his first name and last name, which will separate with a comma within our print statement like this, which will print both of the strings out together. Now we have an issue. There's no space between his first and last name, so what should we do about this? A simple trick known as concatenation can help us. Concatenation is essentially joining together 2 or more strings to create one string, and is done through 2 dots like this. We can concatenate twice, once to join his first name to the space and another time to join his last name to the space, and now when we print it, everything looks perfect. Now looking at his application, it is evident that he failed our little intelligence quiz, and so a year later he finds himself facing the harshest realities of life when he meets unemployment once again, and decides to give the FBI another crack. For this, he needs to fill out another application form, and we're too lazy to create new variables every time the same person applies, so instead we want to replace the old values of his variables with new data. In this application, he's now a year older than last time, so to replace this, we just have to redefine the same variable with the same label like so. This time he passes, and the FBI wants to give him a gun to use on duty. Now on my screen, you can see we have this really real looking gun model. Please hold your applause till the end, thank you. For your script, just insert a part into your game like this and right click it on your workspace to rename it to gun. Now let's say Joe wanted to rename his gun from gun to projectile explosioninator. To do this, we first need a reference to this gun which we will store in a variable to avoid writing it so much. We'll call this variable gun. Everything within this project is contained with a large category called game, which is essentially every single thing inside your game. So we begin with our reference by writing game. Now we can see that our gun is within the workspace, and workspace is under game, so we put a dot and write workspace to indicate the pathway for the script to look into. By the way, we can reference anything in the Explorer in this way, by writing it after the game dot. Finally, we just need to put another dot and write gun to tell the script what we're looking for inside the workspace. Now that we've got the gun inside a variable, we can rename it simply by referencing its name property like so, and redefining it to our string projectile explosionator. Of course, we could have done this without a variable, but then every time we need to reference a gun, we would need to write the whole line, game.workspace.gun, instead of simply just gun. So that's essentially all there is to basic variables, data types, and basic referencing, although it does get more into scope and where you can recall variables from, etc. But I'll go through that in a future video as the concept is slightly more complex. Hopefully I didn't overcomplicate the concept of variables, but make sure you're familiar with the syntax before you proceed, as variables will be used literally everywhere in your code. Also, I have a very exciting announcement to make. As we are nearing 500 subscribers, I have decided to do a computer specs reveal at 500, so that's something to look forward to, I guess. Anyway, I've been awake for a good 2.5 hours now, so it's bedtime again. Good night.